Hi guys, so I've got a small smart repair here to show you. I'm going to try and do a speed run. So there's before and the after. And as you can see, there's a crack in the lower left side of the rear bumper. So our aim is just to repair this for the customer as quick as we can. And we start off by masking, followed by sanding. So using the sandpaper block, I use 240 grit sandpaper, followed by 400 when I'm sanding bodywork. Which is required to then have filler. So I'm creating a concave here. And the reason I'm creating a concave is I want somewhere for the filler to sit. So this will give the filler somewhere great to fit. As you can see, there's a slight indentation there. And that indentation we'll be using for the filler to sit nicely. I've sanded slightly over to the left because there are a few scratches there as well. But this video is solely for the crack. So you can see it's gone through the paintwork, gone through the primer, gone onto the plastic, gone through the plastic, and this is ideal for the filler to sit. So the next step for this repair would be using the Scotch pad. So this is a Scotch pad, and what Scotch pads do is rough up the paintwork where you will be applying paint, lacquer, primer, anything that you want to adhere to the paintwork. It is advised to use a Scotch pad. So we're doing this now to rough up the paintwork, because shortly after the filler we'll be applying primer. So we need something for it to adhere to, otherwise it will just flake off. This here is a tack rag. So the purpose of a tack rag is, I've just sanded that now. I could try and wipe with my hand off the dust, but there'll still be remains, and that dust build up. If you put primer, lacquer or paint, it will just start to show up in the paintwork. So you need to use the tack rag to get rid of it. So now we moved on to the filler. The filler is quite simple really. So there's probably about a tablespoon there. I needed less than that, to be honest. So I did scrape some back into the container. Right, the next step would be to get the hardener. The hardener is a red coloured thick liquid, and you pour that on top diagonally, and that's usually a good indication to the right amount to filler to hardener ratio. So ensure that the hardener is thoroughly mixed. The whole mix will start to go a pinky colour, and then we apply the filler work. Filler work is can be quite difficult really if you're not familiar to it, but you will get the hang of it quite quickly. This is only a minor amount, so I didn't want to put too much on. If you put too much on, you've only got to sand it all off again, and this just prevents that. So you just use small amounts and be mindful of how much you're putting on. And this is called the finesse filler. So the finesse filler is what you use once you are happy with your 2K hardener filler. 2K hardener filler just means you got the filler, you got the hardener. It's now called 2K. So, okay, so we are drying the filler here, ready to apply the micro filler. So we just want to warm it up. We don't want to go too hard on the heat, because it will form little bubbles in the filler, because the heat's trying to escape. You've got nowhere to escape, so it starts to form bubbles. You want to avoid this. So now we are just ensuring it's nice and smooth. We're happy with the finish with the 2K hardener. So I'm just going to sand it back a bit more. Okay. And once I've done that, I will get the tack rag out again, because it is very important to use a tack rag. So as you can see, I'm ensuring the gap at the base of the bumper is the same throughout, because you don't want a big lump of filler there. So I'm smoothing it all off nicely. Okay, and then once I've done that, where is it? There we go, the tack rag. And we're moving on to the finesse. So yeah, so we got the tack rag. We're wiping the whole of the bumper where we're working on, because we do want to minimise the amount of debris that's on there. And with the finesse filler, it is basically so you put the first filler on, you will get micro bubbles as you're sanding, And this microfiller is so fine, it will fill those little micro bubbles, micro holes, and it will give the finish a far better end result than if you were just to use the initial hardener and filler. So a pea-size amount, you don't really want to go too crazy, and you just apply this like so. For this particular repair, I did feel I actually applied too much, to be honest. You have to be careful with microfiller when you're adding too much, because it's a 1K, and what that means is there is no hardener, so you have to rely on heat, aeration, but if it's too thick, it will dry on the outside and it will look dry, but when it comes to sanding, you'll start to move the microfiller around because it hasn't hardened underneath. It'll be almost like a gum, so you really need to apply small little amounts, dry it, apply another layer, dry it, and another layer, dry it. I think on this one, I don't know what I was thinking, but I did one thick layer, but luckily I know how to overcome this. To overcome this, I'll explain. If you do add too thick of a layer, you allow it to dry on the edge, and then what I do is I gently sand it. So I'm going through the layer that's drying to the layer that's slightly damp and gummy, and I'm exposing that, and then I'll reheat it, and then it was fine. So that's how I overcome to that. As you can see, I'm finished in the sanding now. I've used the almighty tack rag because without it there would be dust and particles everywhere. And now that we have finished the filler, 2K filler and micro filler, we move on to a high build primer. I use cans because they're tidier, they're just easier to use, and you don't have to keep washing your gun and your filler. Sorry, not the filler, the where you put the primer into. So you don't have to keep washing that. The spray can, it's all in the can, there's no waste, you don't have to chuck any away at the end. I've familiarised myself with this particular primer, and I'm very happy with the results every single time I use it. So why change something that's not broken is my motto in terms of this. So we apply a few thin coats, use the heat gun. You can also use an infrared lamp, which is sometimes I will do that if the day is not a clear day. And what I mean by that is if the day is a bit dry and a bit dusty, and you know there's leaves and grass has been cut and stuff like that, I'll try not to use a heated blower because it'll blow all that onto the paintwork. Well, this particular day was nice, and it was just a nice day, to be honest with you. But if it is a miserable day, such as raining, I'd use a combination of both, really. We'd set the gazebo up, and we would work on the body panel, as we are here, but we'd have a gazebo, which would prevent any rain. So here we're just drying the paintwork, and drawing the primer rather. As you can see, I'm using my hand to test that it's not going too hot, because that's not what we want. And then we'll sand what we've just worked on to ensure there are no high points or low points. High points and low points is where you put the filler work, but the filler hasn't quite filled the crack or the hole you're trying to fill, so you'll get a low point. What you really want to do is you want to just go slightly over the normal point, so you have a high point now, and what you want to do is you want to sand this and you meet it exactly where it should be. There'll be no high points, there'll be no low points, and the good way to determine whether you got a high or low point is to get actual black paint in a spray can, flick it on, and then you sand, and if you've got any low points, the black paint will remain. If you've got any high points, that will be taken off, the black paint will be taken off, but around the edge, you will still have black paint. meaning you've got a high point. A low point is the other way around. So again, we're applying primer, and we will allow that to dry nicely. And now that I've used the primer and I'm happy with that, I'm wiping the panel down with some solvent, just to clean off the rest of the paintwork that I didn't want any overspray on. So I'll clean that off. And here now I am using a 600 grit to smooth the primer to the paintwork that's already on there. You don't want a big lip, big step, so you want to smooth it so it's nice and equal, and there's no, because otherwise if you put paint on, you'll see the step from where the primer has been put and to where the paintwork is, and you don't want that, because the customer will be able to see the repair, and that's not what we want. We want the customer to not see where the repair has been done. Say if they're selling the car, they want it sold, so they want to not have the next customer looking at the car thinking, oh, it's had this or it's had that done. So yeah, we need to do that. Again, we use the tack rag, and as you can see, the paintwork is actually scuffed, so that's an ideal ground for applying paint. So we apply the paint next. So this is the paint mix that we weigh up and we measure ourselves, and we found the paint code in the driver door, and then we start applying paint. Silly me that I didn't press record when I started applying the paint on the primer, so unfortunately we didn't see the before and after from the primer to the paint, but as you can see, it's what I just did then. So a few little flicks in the left corner, and then there's a bit on the right, but we're not talking about that part. So we've applied the paint, and in between paint layers, again, it's very important to use the tack rag. In this case, you use to get rid of debris, but in terms of metallic, you want to get rid of all the metallic black flecks. And what black flecks are is they'll sit on the paintwork, and it'll give the paintwork a very glittery, over glittery look, and it will stand out like a sore thumb. So you want to get rid of these metallic flecks that are sitting on the paintwork, and you want it to look nice and smooth and just perfect, just like that. So again, we'll apply a bit more paint, and as you can see, I'm not too close. I'm probably about 6 inches away, 7 inches, something like that. And I always put it on a full fan for this kind of work. And I've had this gun for about 6-7 years now, and it's not let me down once. I know people that buy guns every year, and I think, why buy guns every year when you can get used to the one that you're working with and you can master it? And I believe I've mastered this gun. I can do paintwork with it with my eyes closed. So with the lacquer, as you can see, I've applied it. No, sorry, not the lacquer, the paint, and it's all even now. And then following this, I'll be tack ragging it again, and then we'll be moving on very soon to the lacquer. The lacquer is weighed out in a ratio of 2-to-1. So you have your actual lacquer, which is, let's say we weigh out 200 millilitres, and then for the hardener, you will want 100 millilitres of hardener. And then, because we work outside and we don't want our lacquer to run, we don't want it to be sitting too long whilst it's drying. We want it to dry as quick as possible, because outside there's moisture and it will absorb the moisture, and your lacquer will start to bloom, which is when it starts to go like a grey, bluey colour. So to prevent this, we add rocket, which is an accelerant. So now we are applying the lacquer. I always apply a layer of lacquer on the repair first, and then I allow that to dry, and then I go over it again with one coat, a nice thick coat of lacquer. And the reason I do it all in one coat is because we're outside again, there's dust and debris in the sky, in the air, and it will prevent debris and dust landing in between layers if I were to do separate layers. But I do it all in one. But if I didn't do it in separate layers, imagine it's like applying sellotape. You've got dust and debris in the air, that'll land on top of that sellotape. Then you apply another layer of sellotape, and now that dust and debris is trapped. But the way that I do it is one thick layer, and it will potentially have some debris here and there. But because I've done the one layer, the dust and debris will only be sitting on the top layer, thus it will wash off and it will not be noticeable. This here is fade out. Fade out is where you apply, it's a very powerful thickness, and you apply very moderately. You don't want to overdo it because it will mess up your work. And what it essentially does is merges the old lacquer with the new lacquer. So it'll soften the old lacquer, the new lacquer will start to merge into the old lacquer, and it'll become one. And then this, guys, is the final result. As you can see, there's no crack now. It's a nice, clean, simple repair. And yeah, so if you guys liked the audio over the video, give us a like and a subscribe. I'm going to try and do more how-to videos, so I'll be putting more detail in it, so I'll take my time to show you exactly what I'm using. This is just a test run. This is the first video I've done to just show you a quick step-by-step guide of how to repair. Now I'm taking off the masking tape, and you'll see some photos shortly and a video showing the end result. And as you can see, it's nice and flat, no fish eyes, no little lumps, no bumps. It's just a nice clean repair. The lady was very happy, and yeah, so we had a great end result. And some further photos for you to take a look at. And so if you liked this, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video. Thank you.